And we also have microfilm for the papers that have not been digitized yet. We also have city directories. A lot of folks come in to look at the history of their house. They want to see who lived at their address at any given year. We have yearbooks here by donation. Please consider donating your yearbooks to the library. We also have bound periodicals or newsletters by different community organizations, county departments, city departments, and educational institutions. The vault, which you cannot see, which is behind me in the other room, houses a lot of our more precious materials. We have photographs and first edition books, and we do have an inventory if you were interested in looking at what we have in our vault here. Our online resources you can easily access on the Kern County Library homepage. You would just go to the online resources and click on the local history room, and all of our collections, to include multimedia videos and oral histories, are easily accessible there. We just ask that you give credit to Kern County Library, and if you have any questions or usage rights, please feel free to contact me here. We are very excited and honored to host our speaker today in conjunction with Black History Month, and I'm going to go ahead and read his bio. Need my glasses, need my spectacles. Keith Wolaride is a respected business and community leader with over 2 decades of experience in the banking industry since his appointment to the Panama Buena Vista Union School District in 2009 and subsequent election in 2010 until present. Keith has served in key leadership roles in addition to bringing financial expertise and strategic insight to many school districts and businesses throughout California. Keith owns 5 Pillars and Associates, an online leadership development first. He is a dedicated business professor at Bakersfield College, where he mentors and inspires the next generation of business professionals. His academic credentials include MBA from National University and Master's in Christian Studies from Grand Canyon University, and a bachelor's in accounting from California State University, Fresno. He is also a graduate of the University of Washington's Pacific Coast Banking School, Kern Leaders Academy, and the California School Boards Association's Masters in Governance program. Beyond his professional achievements, Keith is deeply committed to community service. He is an active Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Inc. member and serves on the board of directors for the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra and the Kern County School Boards Association. A devoted husband for over 20 years and father to 4 daughters, Keith is also a passionate golfer, avid reader, and author. His works include 5 Pillars, published in 2020, Decisions from the DS, published in 2024, and a contributing chapter in The Alchemy of Teaching, published in 2023. Without further ado, please welcome Keith Wolaride.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you so very, very much. And I'm overwhelmed at this moment when I look out at this audience, because you all have many choices where you could be today. And you chose to have a conversation with me. So I'm deeply grateful and honored and inspired and nervous as all get out, okay, ladies and gentlemen? Because there's 100 other places where you could be. And I see some familiar faces, I see some friends, I see some of my students. Again, I'm just overwhelmed that you all, again, would just take 30 to 45 minutes out of your day to have just kind of a brief, candid, honest conversation, one with another. So again, before we begin, I would ask you all to please join me in giving Lynn Kimber. She put this all together. Lynn, I want to say thank you. When did we start having this conversation? Was it October or November, Lynn?
Yeah, I think it was early October.
Early October. Yeah. And when she invited me to give this conversation and this public discussion, I said, oh, okay, I didn't think too much about it, but as the days drew nearer, the butterflies got to flying. Does that make any sense what I'm saying? And I was telling my wife as I was walking up the pathway, I said, if one person shows, that's a win, because I had to overcome my fear. Does that make any sense what I'm saying? Well, more than one has decided to, again, share your life with me, and for that, I'm forever grateful. Let me ask you all a question. How many of you know who these four individuals are? See, Dr. Anderson does. See, my good friend Fred Prince does. See, Dr. Tucson does. How many is this the first time you've seen these individuals? By a show of hands. It's okay. We're all learning together. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. Well, today I'm going to introduce you to some pillars, and I will be referring to their works in our discussion this morning. This is Miss Ella Baker. We're going to talk about Ella Baker. You've all heard of Dr. King, have you not? By a show of hands. You've all heard of John Lewis, have you not? By a show of hands. There was the conscience behind them. She kept them in line. Yes, she did. Do you know who this is? This is my exemplar, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Cornel West. Dr. West, what he means to me, he wrote a book called Living and Loving Out Loud. But his most seminal work is Race Matters. You've all heard of Race Matters, right? That is his most famous work that he had penned in 1990 something. I don't remember the date. The next man, anybody familiar who this is? Now, I have, forgive me, if I ever meet this man in person, I got a man crush. Because when I meet Dr. Eddie Glaude, professor of African American Studies, the chair of the department at Princeton University, from a point called Morse Point, Mississippi. You do know Cornell's from Sacramento. If I ever meet this man, I know Dr. President Watkey, we were trying to get him on campus. We ain't gonna quit. I may just, y'all have to pull me up, because his intellect is absolutely amazing. And I try to embody Dr. Glaude. You know, they said it was Immanuel Kant in the Critique of Pure Reason who says examples are the go-karts of judgment. Good example, good judgment. Bad example, bad judgment. These three embody this for me. And obviously who this talk is surrounded around. Anybody know who this is? James Baldwin. His friends called him Jimmy. Yes, Maya Angelou called him Jimmy. He wrote the seminal work. You probably heard, Don't Tell It on the Mountain, Giovanni's Room, and the one we will dive into this morning, The Fire, next time. That 1963 classic that rocked the world and still reverberates today. So let's dive into what these four voices have to say in the time that we have together. So normally I give it ad hoc, but there was so much I want to convey, I'm going to read this presentation today. So please bear with me as we talk about the fire next time. That the time is now. And becoming the leaders that we've been waiting for. And we're going to get there. Just bear with me. Y'all okay? Yeah. All right. So this morning, ladies and gentlemen, we celebrate Black History Month. A time to honor the remarkable contributions of Black leaders, of Black thinkers, and Black revolutionaries who have shaped our world. But beyond this celebration, this month demands reflection on where we've been, where we are, and where we must go. James Baldwin, one of the most powerful voices in American history, warned in the 1963 classic, The Fire Next Time, that if we fail to confront racism, injustice, and inequality, the consequences will be dire. Jimmy wrote, quote, If we do not now dare everything, the fulfillment of that prophecy, recreated from the Bible in a song by a slave, is upon us. God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water. It's the fire next time. End quote. But let's be honest. Too often we choose comfort over confrontation. As Dr. Eddie Glaude writes in his 2020 classic Democracy in Black, we dress up America's progress in a sweet-sounding language, pretending things are better than they really are. But Malcolm X had a response for that when he said, "Stop sweet-talking them and tell them about the hell you catch them." The Greek word parrhesia means speaking freely or candidly. It also can refer to boldness or freedom of speech. That's frank speech, honest speech, good trouble speech, as John Lewis would say. It's also risky speech. So this morning, if you don't mind, let's tell the truth. It's not about just where we've been, but about where we are. Let's talk about Baldwin's call for justice, the fight for equity, and the power of leadership through the lens of Ella Baker, Dr. Eddie Glaude, and Cornel West. But ladies and gentlemen, I also would like to frame these lessons within my book, 5 Pillars. The core values that sustain movements, shape great leaders, and keep the fire of justice burning. And those are integrity, decency, courage, perseverance, and faith. Y'all all right?
Yeah.
The fire next time. Baldwin's warning. To understand the urgency of Baldwin's words, we must first understand the man behind them. Born in 1924 in Harlem, Baldwin grew up in a deeply religious household. He was the stepson of a strict preacher. By 14, he was preaching himself, but his sharp mind, restless spirit, and unwavering desire to understand the world led him away from the pulpit and toward the written word. In a nation where racial injustice was an unshakable reality, Baldwin became a literary force, exposing America's deepest contradictions. In his work, Go Tell It on the Mountain, The Notes of a Native Son, and the one we'll be discussing today, The Fire Next Time, were just not books, but demands for truth, demands for reckoning, and a demand on transformation. Baldwin made it clear, if this country refuses to confront its own racism, if it fails to grant black people, brown people, all people the dignity and the rights they deserve, then the future will not be one of peace, but of fire. In terms of today, we are at a crossroads. Just look around you. Just look at the news. Baldwin tells the story of when he was a boy preacher, and a woman preacher asked him a question that many in our community ask. Whose little boy are you? We are a people of community. We want to know who your people are. Like we ask each other that question. Don't we, Mark? Who your people? Where you from? Don't we ask that question? What does your last name represent is what we're really asking. Tell me a little bit about you. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we must ask the question for a different reason. Too many of our politicians, our leaders, our institutions have abandoned integrity and decency. They bow not to justice, not to the people they serve, but to power, money, and those who uphold the status quo rather than fight for change. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we must ask our politicians and elected officials the same question. Whose little boy are you? When they refuse to do right for the people. Integrity is not about what we say. It is about what we do when no one is watching. Decency is about how we treat others, especially those marginalized, those without power, those who need us to stand for them. If we are to answer Baldwin's call, then we must demand leaders who stand for something bigger than themselves. Leaders who embody integrity and decency, even when it's inconvenient, Tommy, and it may cost them. But that's the price we pay if you want to be a leader, young man. Baldwin again argued that innocence in itself is a crime when it is used to avoid confronting injustice. Again, in his book, The Fire Next Time, he warned that America's greatest sin is not just racism, but the refusal to acknowledge it. The insistence on looking away, pretending and acting as if the past and the present injustices are just mere misunderstandings, rather than deliberate choices. Baldwin saw this innocence as willful ignorance, a way for America to maintain the illusion of moral superiority while continuing to uphold systems of oppressions. He wrote, quote, "It is innocence that constitutes the crime." Why? Because claiming innocence, I don't know, that was so long ago. I'm not like that, allows people to avoid responsibility. It turns oppression into an unfortunate accident instead of a reality shaped by policies, power, and prejudices. Dr. Glaude expands on this idea in his 2020 classic, Democracy in Black. Dr. Glaude there. He describes how America hides behind the myth of progress to avoid reckoning the deep racial value gap that still exists today. He argues that the country is obsessed with performing innocence rather than addressing the root causes of injustice. Again, Eddie, in his value gap, connects the past injustices to the present realities. He writes, Dr. Glaude, that the concept of the value gap is crucial to understanding why racial injustice remains deeply embedded in America. He argues that despite claims of progress, there is still a belief, either conscious or unconscious, that white lives matter more than other people's lives. This belief is not just reflected in individual acts of racism, but in the very fabric of American institutions. It is why black and brown communities continue to suffer from economic disparity, mass incarceration, and systemic divestment. It is why politicians still debate whether blacks or browns deserve reparations or whether addressing racial inequality is even necessary. The value gap explains how America can celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. while continuing to uphold policies that disproportionately harm people of color. The value gap. By integrating Glaude's idea into the conversation, we move beyond vague discussions of inequality and force the audience to see the structural nature of racism. The past is not just history, it's our living present. The redlining that denied black families home ownership in the early 20th century directly connects to the wealth gap today. The criminalization of black resistance during the civil rights movement mirrors the demonization of activists in modern protests. We saw that with BLM, did we not? Recognizing the value gap forces us to ask, what do our policies, our laws, and our national priorities say about whose lives matter? Ladies and gentlemen, until we close that gap, not just in rhetoric, but in reality, true justice remains out of reach. But again, Baldwin knew the truth. Innocence is not neutral. It is an excuse. It is not an excuse to do nothing. And doing nothing allows the fire of injustice to keep burning. So the real question is not whether America is innocent, but whether will it finally abandon the illusion of innocence and take full responsibility. Fred, because as long as we refuse to look at ourselves honestly, as long as we insist on innocence over truth, we will remain trapped in the very cycle Baldwin warned us about, which will be the fire next time. Yet at the heart of Baldwin's message was a simple truth. Freedom for some is not freedom at all. Justice must be what? Universal. But what does that really mean? Equality gives people the same. Equity, however, means meeting people where they are and recognizing that some that have been held back for centuries, that they require greater support just to reach at the same starting line. It is not enough to say we are all equal. No, but we must act to dismantle the systems that have historically oppressed marginalized communities. Again, Jimmy put it bluntly. Ignorance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy justice can have, President Watkins.
Will you repeat that?
Ignorance, quote, ignorance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. End quote. Ladies and gentlemen, fighting for equity, though, takes courage. The courage to speak truth in the face of power. The courage to stand up, like today, in front of family and friends, when it's easier, Brown, to just sit down. It takes courage to challenge policies, practices, and attitudes that continue to hold marginalized people back. What does, again, my mentor, my wife will tell you, I'm up on Friday nights watching his videos and listening to his speeches. I'm corny like that, yo. I'm corny like that. Cornel West reminds us that courage is the enabling virtue, the foundation upon which all other virtues rest. In Living and Loving Out Loud, and one of my favorite books, Hope on a Tightrope, he argues that without courage, justice remains an empty dream and love a passive sentiment. It is only through courage that we confront uncomfortable truths, speak against power, and take risks for the greater good. West tells us, courage is the enabling virtue because it allows one to realize all the other virtues consistently. This is a powerful statement because it forces us to recognize that without the will to act, our values mean nothing. Virtues such as integrity, decency, justice, and love are not passive qualities. These, ladies and gentlemen, require boldness, the willingness to take a stand even when it's unpopular, inconvenient, and Dr. King will tell you, even dangerous. Again, in The Fire Next Time, James warned that America's greatest crime, again, is its insistence on innocence. Its refusal to acknowledge its own stain and hypocrisy. But what is required to shadow this illusion? Again, it's the courage to tell the truth, the courage to demand change, and the courage to confront the systems that uphold oppression. Anglad builds on this, showing that how America repeatedly chooses comfort over this confrontation. People like to talk about justice, but when it comes time to act, too many remain silent. West would call this a failure of courage, a refusal to do what is morally necessary because it is socially difficult. But history teaches that progress has never come from comfort. It has come from those who refuse to conform, from Baldwin, who challenged America's moral contradictions, from Malcolm X, who demanded truth without sugarcoating, from Ella Baker, who rejected the top-down leadership in favor of grassroots power. Again, West urges us to practice a deep hope, not a naive belief that things will get better on their own, but of active hope, one that demands work, sacrifice, and most of all, courage. So the question is not whether we believe in justice, it is whether we have the courage, ladies and gentlemen, to fight for it, even when it costs us something or makes us uncomfortable, even when it demands we give everything we have to give. And I will reiterate what Dr. West said, and he teaches us, without courage, all other virtues crumble. Too often, discussions about this topic are softened with polite language, carefully chosen words that comfort rather than confront. Malcolm rejected, again, this approach. He believes that change would not come through carefully managed words to protect the feelings of those in power. We have a tendency, we don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want to be shunned. We don't want to stop being invited to the program. Ladies and gentlemen, we're afraid that our Rolodex will be impacted. Instead, I told you it was going to get a little tight. Didn't I tell you that? That this is what Parmesan is about? Frank, honest speech. Didn't I warn you? Are we okay? I'm looking at you. Are we okay? Then he urged us to speak with urgency, to make injustice undeniable, and to force the nation to confront the brutal reality of itself. Again, his words remind us that America has a pretending that things are better than they are. This is how injustice survives, young man. Not just through violence and discrimination, but through silence of those who refuse to name it. By integrating Malcolm X's challenge into the speech, the message becomes clearer. Politeness in and of itself will not dismantle oppression. It is not enough to acknowledge racial inequality in theory. We must name the system, the policies, and the practices that uphold it. We must expose the harm being done without hesitation or euphemisms. As Baldwin, Glaude, and Malcolm X all insist, justice does not come from comfort. Morgan, it comes from courage. It comes from confrontation and from an unwavering commitment. And ladies and gentlemen, that takes perseverance, because no battle worth fighting is won in a day. Perseverance is the backbone of every movement for justice. The fight against injustice is rarely quick or easy. It is a long, demanding struggle that requires unwavering commitment, even when progress seems slow or impossible. History shows us that those who seek to dismantle systems of oppression must be prepared, Madeline, to face setbacks, prepared to face resistance and moments of deep frustration. Yet it is through perseverance, the ability to keep going despite the obstacles, that real and lasting change is achieved. That's why perseverance is essential. The Black Eagle, are you all familiar with the Black Eagle? Rest in peace, Joe Madison. Always reminded us this, did he not, Dr. Anderson, that the struggle for justice is not a moment, it's a movement. The protests we're seeing, the boycotts today, that can't be a moment. That has to be a movement. It has to go on beyond when it's in vogue, when it gets really uncomfortable. Let's think about the bus boycotts of 1955-56. It was over 350 some odd days that those people walked. We can't get a generation to go 20 minutes without their cell phone. Am I telling the truth?
Yeah.
Again, change is a moment. It's not a moment, it's a movement. And that takes sacrifice. It takes sacrifice. And it is also a mind shift and change. Which leads me to Ms. Ella Baker. The civil rights movement is a power example of this kind of endurance. They get activists like Ella Baker, John Good Trouble Lewis, and Fannie Labe Hamer. What is she famous for saying? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. But these people face constant threats, violence, and institutional roadblocks. Yet they refuse to give up. When legal victories like the Civil Rights Act of '64 or the Voting Rights Act of '65 were achieved, they were not a result of one single march or speech. These were the product of years of tireless organizing, countless hours of work, and the courage to persist through heartbreak and danger. Perseverance meant continuing the fight when progress seemed invisible, because they knew that the struggle for justice was a marathon, not a sprint. But perseverance is not only about enduring, it's also about adapting. Adapting to what? Because there will be backlash. It means learning from setbacks. It means learning and organizing smarter and staying committed even when the victories are small or slow. It is about understanding that justice is not a straight path, but a winding road filled with progress, and there will be some pushback. So what does that mean for us today? It means we cannot afford to be fair-weather activists, passionate only when cause is trending or when victory seems certain. Perseverance demands that we show up consistently, that we keep speaking out, organizing, and pushing for policies that dismantle injustice, even when the spotlight fades. When there's no Keith Wolaride at the Kern County Library, we still must persist and push. Because the fight for justice is not the loudest voice or the biggest march that wins. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the secret. It's the unwavering commitment to those who refuse to give up. Perseverance is the force that turns moments into movements, and movements into lasting change. So as I close, let's talk about Ella Baker. Faith and the power of the people. If we are to talk about leadership, real, transformative, people-centered leadership, then we must talk about Ella Baker. As a key organizer in the civil rights movement, she worked alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but never sat in the shadows. She helped found the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. You all know it as SNCC, do you not? Who's all familiar with SNCC? Ooh, we got a generation, Morgan, that's unfamiliar with SNCC. We got work to do, us OGs. We got work to do. This was a group that empowered young black activists to take charge of the movement through direct action, voter registration, and community organizing. You remember the Mississippi bus? They taught you that in school, did they, young people? Oh, this man looked at me. Okay, we're going to have a conversation. But Ella Baker's leadership is one that I am now coming to adopt. It's taken me some time, Fred. Ella Baker rejected the idea that leadership should flow solely from the pulpit to the pews. That change should be dictated from above with only one charismatic figure leading the way while the masses simply follow. She rejected that. The king mentality, the king being the Messiah, she rejected that. She said instead that in a people-centered movement, where power was decentralized and ordinary people were the ones who were sitting in the pews, became the real force for change. To Baker, leadership was not about a single voice. This is what leads us to today. It was not, let me read this again. Baker leadership was not about a single voice commanding an audience, but about collective empowerment. A movement where leadership belonged to who? All of us in this room. Not simply those on the stage who have a microphone. That's what Baker. And I'm coming to that conclusion now. Because it changes the philosophy that challenges traditional modes of leadership, especially where I'm from within the black church, where ministers often played central roles in civil rights activism. While she deeply respected figures like Dr. Martin Luther King, she also understood the danger of movements that relied too heavily on a single leader. She warned that if leadership remained confined to the pulpit, then movements could be weakened by the loss of one figure rather than sustained by the strength of the people. What happened to the civil rights movement when Dr. King was assassinated? What happened to it's still going on, but when Cesar Chavez, when you have that one central leader, things have a tendency to dissipate. That's why I'm beginning to lean toward her philosophy now. True liberation, she argued, required every person, how many? Every person to see themselves as a leader. I'm going to say that again. True liberation, she argued, required every person to see themselves as a leader, to recognize that their voice, their action, and their organizing power were just as essential to those of any preacher behind the podium or any speaker at the Kern County Library. So as we sit in these pews, so to speak, we must realize that we are all the leaders we've been waiting for. The responsibility does not belong only to those in positions of authority. It belongs to all of us. Baker's vision demands that we stop waiting for someone else to lead the change. We must rise from the pews, step into our power, and take ownership of the fight for justice. The pulpit can inspire, but the pews must act. Because history is not shaped by speeches alone, but by the hands and feet of those willing to do the work. I'm going to say that again. You still with me?
Yes.
The pulpit can inspire, but the pews must act. Because history is not shaped by speeches alone, but by the hands and feet of those willing to do the work. So as I think more about this, I agree with Ms. Baker that leadership should not be about one charismatic figure at the top. If I'm a leader, it is my responsibility, young man, to your question, to instruct, to inspire, and to invigorate. That's your role. If you're a leader, it's to instruct, inspire, and invigorate the people. Those people being students, workers, mothers, fathers, all those who have a direct stake in justice. Ella Baker's leadership was a testament to faith. Not faith in one person, but the faith in the collective power of the people. She understood that justice was not a passive pursuit. And just like this was just on Hulu, Sly and the Family Stone. Have you all seen that Sly and the Family Stone series? His song Stand declared, stand. There's a cross for you to bear. Things to go through if you're going anywhere. More, you remember that stand. Ella Baker knew progress requires people willing to bear the burden and fight for a better world. Again, I love Sly and the Family Stone and their message of everyday people. Love that song. I am everyday people. Y'all remember that. And there's a line that says, quote, I am no better and neither are you. We are the same in whatever you do. So Ella didn't believe that a leader should be at the front of a movement. She believed the movement belonged to us all. So ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, will you stand? Will you believe? Will you fight for justice, for equity, for leadership rooted all in faith, because it may not go well, by the way. It may not go well. So as I conclude this conversation, I appreciate your time. Reflection is important, but it is not enough. Too often, Black history is treated as a time for remembrance rather than for action. Schools teach about racism as something that happened then, not something shaping lives now. There are speeches, books, and conversations about injustice, often end with a sense of moral clarity, but without a clear next step. And Eddie warns us that this is one of the greatest dangers in discussions about this topic. If they become just speeches for reflection rather than demands for movement. This is why strengthening the call to action is essential. This speech cannot be simply about acknowledging Baldwin's warning or Ella Baker's leadership or the existence of the value gap. It must demand something from each and every one of us. It must challenge people to go beyond passive support and into active engagement. The real test is not whether we agree that injustice exists. It's whether we are willing to dismantle it. This means pushing for policies that addresses racial disparities, challenging complacency in our own communities, and recognizing that silence is complicity. Strengthening the call to action shifts the speech from an intellectual exercise into a rallying cry. It forces listeners to ask themselves, what will I do with this knowledge? Will I just sit with it? Or will I act? Because if we truly believe in justice, we cannot afford just to be spectators. It is not enough to reflect on history. We must decide to shape history. Again, James warned us that the fire that awaits if we fail to change. Ella showed us how to lead that change. And equity remains the battle we fight if we want justice to prevail. So I challenge each and every one of you this morning to move forward with integrity, decency, courage, perseverance, and faith. Let this month be more than just a celebration. Let it be a movement. Let the fire next time be a fire of transformation. Because again, the future is not in the hands of history's great leaders. It's in your hands. And in the voices of everyday people, be willing to stand. The fire next time will not be one of destruction if we make it a fire of justice, a fire of change, and a fire that lights the way forward. The future, ladies and gentlemen, is ours to shape. So let's stand up and claim it. And I will leave you with the last paragraph of James Baldwin's 1963 classic work, The Fire Next Time. It concludes with the powerful line, if we do not now dare everything, the fulfillment of that prophecy, recreated from the Bible in the song of a slave, that God gave us, that, remember, ladies and gentlemen, God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water. It's the fire next time. That's the end of my time, and I thank you. I guess it's time for questions, queries, discussion. Yes? Yes, Ms. Kimber. This is your house. I'm a guest, so whatever you want to do, I'm a guest in your home. Yeah, a couple Q&A. Yes, ma'am.
You reference active engagement, clear next steps.
Yes, ma'am.
Bakersfield.
Yes, ma'am.
Today, what are they?
Well, I believe it's engaging with those you've elected to serve you. We all have an email address, do we not? Do we not? Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo. They work for you. Let's not forget that. So if there's something that disturbs you, that causes you consternation or heartburn, write them an email. Write a community voice. Make a phone call. This is that engagement, ladies and gentlemen. This is the engagement. And it takes what? Starts with a C. courage, then that's that virtue that enables everything else. This isn't easy, to use Parisia's plain speech. But after what I saw with this month possibly being gone, I can't sit by and say nothing. How dare I when someone came before me so that I could have this time? And if I want my grandchildren to have this time, I owe it to them to put it on the line. Now, it may work out for me. This is online. It may not. But it is what it is. I just have to trust. Does that make sense? Have faith and trust. Thank you for your question. Anyone, another question? Yes, sir.
I do have one. So you're clearly radiating with passionate energy, and I really admire that. You really mean every word you say.
I hope so.
At least it sounds like
Yes,
it.
I do.
So I'm curious, what moment in your life did you come to realize this kind of energy and purpose?
I've been blessed, young man, my entire career. But I also settled for the gated community complex. I come from South Merced. Not a whole lot of brothers come out of South Merced.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to go to school, matriculate through Fresno State, get a accounting degree, meet my wife, have just lovely life, right? I had the gated community. I don't live in a gated community, but what do I mean by that is emotionally. You know when you go to a gated community, you punch in your phone numbers, doop, 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 doop. The gate opens,
Right.
it's a metaphor. And I go into my la-la land, my middle-class world,
Okay.
until Brown was killed. And Freddie Gray. Remember all those black slayings we had in the early 2000s, 99, 2000, 2001, when those brothers were being slaughtered? Sandra Bland. Remember Sandra Bland? Oh, my dear brother. These were police killings. Yes. Michael Brown. Remember Michael Brown Ferguson?
Heard.
Oh, we're gonna have to have lunch.
Yeah.
That awakened me out of my gated community complex. My middle class malaise. Because it could have happened to me. Nobody would have asked you president of the school board. They didn't ask that man that question, did they? I could be just as stopped over a broken taillight just like anybody else. Yeah, Professor Wolaride. Could be stopped. Could be pulled out of the car. I see my friends, Fred Prince, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Tucson, Morgan Clayton. They could be stopped too. And have been. That awakened me out of my middle class malaise. Then I just started writing. And then the way my computer is, I have pictures of family pictures on my left-hand side. And I looked at my dad's picture. And he said, what did I teach you? What principles did I teach you? And that's where perseverance, integrity, decency, courage, all undergirded by faith came in. So that was in 2020. So yeah, I wrote 5 pillars in 2020. It's 5 years old now. It's maybe time for a refreshing. But no, I got shaken and awakened out of my middle class. Yeah, man, you live in this bubble. But it could have happened to me. Yes, it could have happened to me. From all this you see, I'm a miracle. I'm a miracle. But it could have been snuffed out. Yes, yes. That's the uncomfortable truth. That's where Baldwin talks about that innocence is the crime. But we have to face it.
Yeah.
That's what he's talking about. Yes. Excellent question. Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes, Joyce.
Keith, I'd like to thank you. I grew up in the Philippines, and a lot of the history that we know are told from a white centrist perspective. And so some of the things that I learned from you today are not totally, but quite obliterated from the textbooks that we read, from the news that we watched. And so what this now brings me to is, with all that's been going on right now, how do we awaken and burn that fire of courage within them?
Starts with you. Thank you for your question, Joyce. Again, it starts with you. Remember, what did Ella say?
Keith, repeat the question.
The question was, what can we do as everyday people? Well, just like we talked, it starts with you. Remember, she talked about the leadership is not from the pulpit. It's in the pew. You have everything you need to make change. Joyce, do you realize that? Dude, no, you didn't answer the question. Do you realize, young lady, you have everything you need to shape the world? In your hands. You just have to believe it. And it's risky. And oh, by the way, I'm speaking for Keith Wolaride, not from his employer, by the way. This is me. But think about it. We have what we all need. Joyce, you have lanes that I don't run in. You have impact and influence on people that I will never meet. But that's the lane you've been given. We all have a lane. Walk in your lane. We all have something. Use what you've been given. You may not can give a presentation like this. I've heard you speak. You can. But you can, in fact, just having coffee with somebody, you don't know what that ripple will be. It just starts with a C. Courage. Yes, Brian.
So how do you build that courage? How do you, if you don't have that courage? Apparently, folks are sitting back without the courage. How do you arouse it, stimulate it? How do you get it going?
One event at a time, Brown. One small step at a time. Do you know how much courage it took for me to get up here?
Yeah.
But it's one conversation at a time. One small act at a time. One conversation at a time. When you see something wrong and you decide, I gotta deal with that one. One uncomfortable conversation at a time. But it's within you, my dear brother. That's again from the pulpit to the, if I'm a leader, if Steve's a leader, Tommy's a leader, if Fred's a leader, Black Guy's a leader, it's our job to inspire people like you. So that give you the tool so that you can be all that God has created you to be. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have been engaging with our city for a few years now. And I learned some things that a little while ago our city was sued for not meeting a mandate and building the low-income homes. So that, they were sued by the state of California. So the homes still didn't get built. So I was like, wow, that's just kind of like bribery, because they just took some money, hey, we're just not gonna build the homes. And then I'm here and I'm engaging and I'm seeing certain sides of town, southeast and east, are severely neglected. And they're being neglected, and we're trying to push back of this neglection. And then they decided, oh, we're gonna build a new high school, not southeast, but southeast, and some homes. And those homes still really are not gonna be affordable. And all this time, prices are going up, and they're saying, well, we don't wanna be like LA. But their trajectory is going that way with the cost of living, especially homes. Our biggest expense, insurance and utilities, our biggest expense, going up and up and up. So these policies are oppressing us every day. And the best thing I can figure out to do is to start my own nonprofit and build affordable homes. But in order to make that happen, I need lawyers, I need all these other people that I am struggling to find. even though I'm in the community and I'm voicing my opinion on things and what's happening, I kind of want to just say, let's just fire them all, starting with the city manager. Okay? Because they just smiling faces. You know, they're not really real. And I'm uncomfortable, but I'm contented. But I'm trying to strive to move forward. And this is really, really hard. And it's like, it's just because I'm not from Bakersfield? I don't know what it is, but we really need to awake and arise. And
Dear brother,
Can we
again, you're dealing
call people?
with systems, right? You notice I didn't call names. Dealing with a system. So the way you deal with the system, the way you're dealing with the system, you do something, you made something, you said, not because I'm from Kern County. You live in a large state. There's some voices that may help you, but it may take some time, some energy, some sacrifice for you to find them. Does that make sense?
yes.
If you don't, it's hard. Remember, it's changing systems. If we wanted the system changed, it'd have been changed by now.
That's true.
So it takes time. It takes sacrifice. But again, I'm gonna go back to that word. It takes what? Starts with a C. Courage. Keep plugging. Brother Clayton.
Keith, courage comes in two dimensions. It comes positively and it comes negatively. And negative courage feeds on fear. And it uses its negative courage to push its way through to whatever their objectives are. Which is, for me, just sharing the pillar of thoughts that you had and centering in on the take-home value that I'm taking with me today is simply that society needs to recognize there are two things. There's the worldly mindset and the spiritual mindset. The negative fear feeds on the worldly side of it. The positive, which is what you spoke about today, the pillars you spoke about are all on the spiritual side of things and bringing in self-reflection. What I need to do to empower myself. So what I'd like to ask you, without pontificating too much, is what is the one take-home value within the art of collaboration that you see, keyword collaboration, that you see that we could take home as a family of people for the community here? What is the one thing that Keith Wolaride would like to see happen? That one take-home value thing, what would that be?
Thank you for the question. Again, that's my mentor, so this is my guy. Morgan, that's a great question, one that I'm still wrestling with, because it's so vast, right? It's so complicated. But like Brown was asking the question, I think we have to come to that one thing we can do, because I'm coming away from the one centralized leadership, that model. You run the lanes I don't run into, but you have impact and influence in those lanes. We all have impact and influence in our certain lanes. I'm moving away from that one thing. But what can you do individually? You run in circles. Madeline runs in circles. Tommy runs in circles. My man runs in circles. You work your lane. Ask you, like you said, the spiritual as well. Ask God, what is my lane? For my education is my lane. What can I do in education to spark something? You know. So
The key word I'm hearing you say to share with others is the power of invitation.
of invitation and the power of one. Cindy, you can do it. You can do it. Buffy, you can do it. We all have a lane. Leticia, you have a lane. Work your lane. The Baker model. Let's be candid. This is going to hurt. King is dead. He is. But who is he left behind? Those that can walk in his legacy. Does that make sense, ladies? Because let's be honest, we have 4 girls. After church, we've asked that empowering question. What do you all want to eat? We get 20 different responses, and mama solves the problem. You follow what I'm saying? So imagine when you got a community. You're not going to gather all the chicks. Does that make any sense what I'm saying? But everybody has the lane that they can run in. They all have an impact. influence and inspiration with your circle of influence? Yes, ma'am.
My thoughts have changed too, from just the one leader to multiple people working together. My thoughts were, like, each person has an expertise in a different thing. If we started creating like councils, like if we were unable to create a whole nonprofit organization, but by creating councils and everyone using their skills and working together to make change, I think that would be a solution.
That's an option as well. You all have a voice. What's stopping you? 3 letters. Y, O. Yes, sir.
Professor, a lot of the words you're using, and even the title of the presentation reminds me of the book by MLK, Why We Can't Wait.
Why We Can't Wait, 1966, 67.
Yeah, great book.
Mm-hmm.
What other books do you recommend other than Why We Can't Wait?
Oh, everything by Dr. King.
Okay.
Everything by this man. His latest one, I did borrow the title. The latest we've been looking for. This is his latest book, where he goes into King, he goes into X, and he talks about the leadership of Baker. Again, Dr. Cornel West. And read Jimmy back from the 60s. Read James Baldwin. Read James Baldwin. Read James Baldwin. He lays it out. It's laid out. And it's easy reading. Now, sometimes Jimmy can be a little dense, right? But he tells the truth. That line changed my life. Again, in the Fire Next Time, in the epilogue or the note or the letter to his nephew, when he said it's the innocence, am I right, Dr. Anderson? Is the crime. That changed my life when we just kind of go around like, well, not us, not me. That's where stuff starts and stays. Read James Baldwin. The Price of the Ticket. No Name in the Street. And then there's some lessons in his novels. Giovanni's Room. Go Tell It on the Mountain. If Bill Street Could Talk. Read Jimmy's novels as well. They will have an impact on the way you think. And again, it's been since 2020 that I just have to get off Facebook and put my face in a book. and those of you who know me, they know I'm a social media junkie, right? They know I spend way too much time on that platform, but get off Facebook and put my face in a book. I think our society would be different if we would adhere to that small piece of advice. And books are what? Free! We're in a location. How much does it cost, Lynn?
It's free.
It's free! It's free. Well, yes, Brad.
I heard you say you come out of Merced, and you mentioned not too many brothers came out of Merced. Are you trying to, you like to see more brothers get like you? Like,
No, I don't want you to be like me.
Like you got success, like successful, because it takes a lot to get on that podium. And at least,
Brother, you have everything you want.
well, I like to get like you, Keith.
I appreciate that. It's an honor. I appreciate that.
Mimic the success.
But you start where you are. You already have
All right.
everything you need. Okay? You don't want to be, my wife will tell you, you don't want to be like me.
No, I just wanted to say a comment, encourage you. One of the reflections I have when I went to a former seminar similar to yours, they said that one key to overcome like racism, especially in the Black community, is to get to know Black people and be friends. And that's always followed me my whole life. And I said, well, I thought to myself, like, how can I become friends with more Black people when minorities don't even have the safe space and communities to go out so I could get to know new people? And so I know you said that you were nervous today and all that stuff, and I just want to commend you, because in Kern County, in Bakersfield, there's not a lot of safe spaces where I get to meet new people when I desire to make those friendships. And so I encourage you to keep doing it, especially in Kern County. You might be the only black professor they've ever had, or the black voice. So I don't think that,
I'm gonna introduce you to somebody. Turn around. Dr. Tommy Tucson. There's the ex-president of Bakersfield College, Steve Watkins. Business owner, Mr. Fred Prince. Pastor, Pastor Greg. Oh, we here, baby. We here. Caltech Security. We here. We here. So no, Dr. Anderson. I can't forget my good friend Dr. Anderson. We here. Them practice. We here. So, but again, we appreciate that. But to your point, unfortunately, Kern County does have a reputation. But how do we overcome that? By doing what we're doing here, some public discussions and conversations. And it's risky. It's risky. But I want a better world for my grandbabies. Yes. It was funny, and I'm gonna leave you all with this. I was looking through some pictures of my great-grandparents. One generation out of slavery. You follow what I'm saying? And I said, damn, if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, we're gonna repeat. You know, it's funny, and we're gonna repeat history when I'm watching things. It's like coming out of an abusive relationship. Instead of me beating you 5 days a week, I only beat you 3. Or Malcolm X put it this way: if a knife has been stabbed in your back 9 inches, but I only pull it out 3, it's cruel for me to say, celebrate the progress. The way you fix it is you pull it out all the way and you repair the breach. Does that make any sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's how you restore. So when somebody asks, haven't we made progress? Yes! But the knife's been in 9. Don't pull it out 6 and tell me to celebrate the progress. You pull it all the way out. And then you repair the wound. That's how change occurs. Again, that's the end of my time. I thank you all for your attention.